Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. So this is our first collaborative event with the Sikh Human Rights Group, which is an NGO with special consultative status at the United Nations and the Green Party. So we're really excited to see so many of you here. Thanks so much for coming, taking time out of your evening. I'd like to welcome Dr. Jasdev Rai, who is the director of the Sikh Human Rights Group, just to give you a quick introduction to what the organisation is about and what they get up to.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming and thank you for all the speakers. The Sikh Human Rights Group was started in 1985. Our concentration early in our years was on human rights issues in India, etc. We used to take them to the UN, but after 93 we diversified into a number of issues. One was diversity, and we are trying at the UN to have a declaration on diversity, United Nations Declaration on Diversity. And then we worked quite a lot on transnational corporations, because we think transnational corporations are even more powerful than countries, but not accountable at any level for human rights violations and their impact on the climate and things like that. And we're glad to say that with working with a number of other NGOs, there is a huge sort of movement and process now going on at the UN to make transnational corporations both accountable, and they have to have binding agreements and instruments that they have to incorporate in their management. We have a very keen interest on environment and climate issues, sustainable development. We have a number of affiliates, some in Brazil who work on the Amazonian indigenous peoples' approach to environment. Then we have in South Africa the KwaZulu University in Durban, which works on indigenous knowledge systems. They have a whole department working on indigenous knowledge systems. Traditional African approach to the environment. We have a number of projects in India and some in Thailand and some other countries as well. Our approach to the environment and climate is two-pronged. One is we think that civil society is not that engaged in this. We leave too much to governments and big corporations. And civil society needs to take ownership of the climate and environment and sustainable development issues, because in democracies like this, for instance, politicians have to listen to people. Even in autocracies, in dictatorships, those governments don't survive if they don't have the support of the people in some of the issues. And we find that outside Europe, civil society is not that engaged with the environmental issues. So our second approach is a pluralistic approach. We think that almost every civilization, culture, belief, community has had for centuries had ideas and concepts on human relation with the environment. It's nothing new. The environment is not a new thing. It's there in every culture you can see. But they've all been marginalized for some reason in the whole debate on the climate issues, and there is only one approach. We are pushing for a more pluralistic approach so that communities elsewhere, this is why we have the Amazonian indigenous people involved. We have the traditional African, what's called Ubuntu philosophy of looking at the environment. In India, we've seen a number of very successful projects which are based on Indians' belief systems rather than on a very logistic approach. And we see similarly in Thailand and elsewhere. So it's really exciting to see the students being part of this, and I think it's your future really which is at stake. And if you don't get involved in this, if you don't take ownership, it's ownership, not just activism. This is your future. This is your world. This is your earth, and you have to take responsibility for it. And if you take responsibility for it, politicians will have to listen to it. Big corporations will have to listen to us. So I'm there, and I thank you very much for organizing this. Our approach to the UN was adopted by the United Nations, and they published a book at UNESCO where we said you have to ask different cultures and civilizations what their approach to environment is. You can't just have a universalist approach, which had an impact on the on the committee that was set up to create universal ethics of environment, our approach was that you should try and agree on goals. So if you want to reduce carbon for 2%, 3%, but let different cultures find their own ethical values which will inspire them to take action. And the UN, we're glad to say, has been working on that. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, Muthiah is unable to attend today, just owing to his other professional commitments. So please accept our sincerest apologies. However, we are very much looking forward to listening to the wealth of experience that our current panellists bring with them today.
So who are we? I'm Amelia Jefford. I am a third-year law and politics student here at Cardiff, and I'm also a human rights intern at the Sikh Human Rights Group. I have a lot of interest in pluralism, as Jasdev was explaining, and making sure that we achieve climate justice and not just force our Western ideals on every culture.
And I'm Alex Jameson. I am a third-year politics student. I'm also the president of the Cardiff Green Party Society, and it's really nice to see so many of you guys here today.
I'm sure most of you know this, as you're clearly interested enough to book a ticket to this event, but just in case, I'll just give a brief introduction onto what climate change is. So climate change refers to change in temperature and weather patterns across the globe, and it's mainly due to our species' overconsumption of our planet's resources, so namely fossil fuels. But to give an exact definition, global climate change refers to average long-term changes over the entire Earth. So these include warming temperatures, changing in precipitation, and there's also rising sea levels, shrinking mountain glaciers, ice melting at a faster rate than usual in places like Greenland, Antarctica and the Arctic, and also changes in flower and plant blooming times, which can really affect our access to food and food security. So the Earth's climate has constantly been changing. You often hear this argument from climate change deniers, even before humans were brought into the picture. But scientists have observed unusual changes recently. So, for example, the Earth's average temperature has been increasing much more quickly than we would expect over the past 150 years. So as you can see from this graph, there has been a scientifically significant change in the general temperature that can't really just be blamed on coincidence.
So as Amelia mentioned, one of the major impacts of global warming is the melting of ice caps and subsequent sea level rising. This is something that threatens our coastlines around the UK. One of these is Cardiff. So as you can see here on the map, this is predicted to be where the sea levels are rising by 2050. Wales is not the exception in rising temperatures across the globe, as we can see by this graph. This shows how Wales's potential rise in temperatures through the 2050s and 2080s in both low and high emission scenarios. As you can see, we're on a path to rising temperatures. Even if we cut down our emissions, the situation will still get worse. Obviously, if we don't make any changes, the situation will significantly increase.
So recently we all saw the devastating effects of Storm Eunice, and I know we were all happy to get a day off uni with it being closed, but these extreme weather events are set to continue if climate change worsens. So this pie chart can give you an idea of where Wales's emissions are actually coming from. So even though we are aware that corporations are the biggest contributions to climate change, especially on a global scale, we as individuals can play our part in reducing our own climate anxiety and our effect on the planet through small incremental changes. And that's kind of what this event is about today. So our panellists today are going to explore the changes of the environment and things that we can do, and how us as students and young people can really make a change for the better.
So today's event really is just an opportunity for you to learn more about how you can help mitigate and adapt to the negative impacts of climate change. We'll start by asking the panellists some broad questions to get their perspective on the issue, and then there'll be a chance for you to ask your own questions. So if you want to take any notes or anything, feel free to do that throughout.
So we really hope that you enjoy the event, and again, thank you so much for coming. So without further ado, you're probably wondering who these wonderful people are, so it is time to meet our speakers.
So first up we have Anthony Slaughter. He is the leader of the Welsh Green Party. He was elected in 2018 but had previously served as the deputy leader in 2014 and 15. He's an active member of the Welsh Green Party and a campaigner for several years, both locally in Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan and nationally across Wales.
Next we have Amerjit, and she is the deputy leader for Plaid Werdd Cyrmu in 2021. She was also elected as the Equality and Diversity Officer for the Welsh Green Party and the Policy Officer for EWGP. So Ammi has been a lifelong campaigner for both environmental and social justice issues, and she also has a background in arts and law.
And last but not least, we have Sophie. So Sophie works as a climate justice activist with Extinction Rebellion Cardiff Youth. So Extinction Rebellion, if you don't know, are an international movement that uses non-violent civil disobedience in an attempt to halt mass extinction and minimise the risk of social collapse.
So enough of us talking, we will move on to the questions for the panellists. So first off, in your expert opinions, how important are young people in our national effort to mitigate and adapt to the negative impacts of climate change? And what can university students specifically do to help us as a society overcome the many challenges and imminent threats of climate change? Anthony, if I could ask you to start, please.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the invitation. It's great to be at an in-person event again, not pressing mute, unmute. So really good, and really looking forward to the questions. And just to echo so much of what's already been said, you described the situation perfectly, the urgency that's needed, and also the reference to the global scale. I'll quickly touch on that before we start talking about what we can do as individuals, but it's so important to touch on those communities. And we had COP26 last year in December, which by any measure was a failure. We didn't make the progress we need to make, but one of the things that was positive about that was the voices of indigenous groups from across the world were there, and they were making their voices heard. And as Jaz had said, that is so important because we have to work together as an international community and let those communities work in the way that best suits them and the knowledge that they've got that we can learn from. There's a phrase that's quite often used in campaigning, especially in disability rights, but also across equality and across the environment, nothing about us without us. And I think that is as equally true for the struggle for climate justice as it is for any other struggle for justice. So what can we do as individuals? What can young people do? Well, young people are very definitely the future. Young people have given us the wake-up call. We have gone along paying lip service to it, politicians before us, acknowledging a problem, a tweak here, a tweak there, a press release there, some greenwash here. And young people came out. We saw the school strikes for climate just before lockdown, and it was so inspiring, the demonstrations and marches in Cardiff. Young people making their voices heard, young people expressing their frustration at what previous generations, my generation and previous generations, have caused and have left this legacy, this toxic legacy. So there are so many ways to get involved, and I always like to look at it because I have a long history. I've been an active Green Party campaigner for over a decade now. Before that, I was involved with all sorts of on-the-ground demonstrations, street activity, and also community activity. So I think there are always three strands to tackling these problems of environmental justice. And we also must, as the Green Party as well, this goes back to the global picture, we must always remember that the struggle for climate justice is indivisible from the struggle for social justice and racial justice. They're all three sides of the same problem. It's equality and inequality that is at the heart of all these. So going back to the actual question, sort of having skirted around like a politician, I always say there are three ways to address these, and we all find our own avenue for doing this. The first is on the street. There's awareness raising, and that's not just on the street. That can be through writing and the arts, and Annie knows a lot more about this than me. Raising awareness, letting people know there's a problem. And as I said, that is what the School Strikes for Climate did so well, and what XR have done so well. And I'm really pleased to say that we're working together with XR Cymru on a demonstration on a rally next week outside the Senedd, together with Green New Deal Cardiff, to protest the granting of an extension to the coal mining licence at Aberpergan Colliery outside Neath. That's an example of how governments say the right thing. We've got a Welsh government that has declared a climate emergency. Cardiff Council has declared a climate emergency. Yet this licence has gone ahead with the UK government and the Welsh government both passing the buck to each other. This licence will allow the extraction of another 10 million tonnes of coal between now and 1939, which smashes all the climate change targets out of the window, out of the roof. So that highlights the need for these actions. So there's first, as I said, there's the raising awareness, the actions on the street. Then there's community activism, and this is actually where my journey started. This is how I got into this. I moved to Penarth, just outside Cardiff, 18 years ago. Very much aware of all of these issues and been on protests and demos, but never really engaged. And then I was very inspired by the Transition Town movement, which was only just emerging at that time. And that was about communities looking forward and looking at the climate crisis that was coming. And as has been touched on, even if we do all the right things now, certain implications are already locked in. Certain things are going to happen. So the Transition Town movement was looking at that and how do communities empower themselves? How do communities take some control over that future and build resilient communities? So that revolved around things like local food growing initiatives, local safe streets initiatives, planting, all sorts of schemes where communities come together and awareness raising things. And this is where I got involved. I joined a group called Gwerthu Open Earth Greening, GPG, which basically was a transition town in all but name. And that was a really inspiring few years of my life and got really heavily involved in that. And that involved things like planting a community orchard at Cosmoston Park. We built raised beds on the station, at Penarth Station, for food growing and plant growing. Started a local sustainable food festival, the local shop local loyalty card scheme to support local independent businesses. And these things are all, and we're going to touch on growing and food later on, I understand, but these things are all ways of a community actually taking action. Yes, it's not the solution, but it's definitely part of the solution. And what's also so valuable about the community activities is this fact that it empowers people, because climate change is scary, climate change is frightening, that's why so many people put their heads in the sand. But just doing a small thing like planting a community orchard, people start to feel that they can make a difference. You know, some people in the environmental movement will look down their noses and say, you know, we need system change, not climate change, which I absolutely 100% agree with. But that it should never be used to belittle the attempts and the efforts of communities to make a difference in their own neighbourhood, because that's where change starts. We change where we live, we change where we love, and that builds into the bigger picture. So that's the second strand. And the third strand of dealing with this problem is what I now spend most of my time doing, is making political change. So the Green Party, while we are very much with XR, we are not of XR. We support, and it's a founding policy of the Green Party is non-violent civil disobedience to achieve our aims. But we recognise that the big changes that need to be made in society require a change of the people in charge. We need different hands on those levers of government, whether it's at Westminster, the Senate and the Bay, or here in Cardiff Council. So those are three areas where individuals can make a difference. And I think we all find our own comfort zone in different, and I've been more active in some than others at different stages of my life. But where young people particularly can make a difference, I think, is leading on those issues, whether it is joining a political party. The Young Greens are inspiring. They're a semi-autonomous group, the youth wing of the Green Party. They push us so hard. They are so critical. They make sure that the party lives up to its founding values. And we're getting incredible young people elected in councils across England, and we're going to do that in Wales this May. So there's that level of involvement. Join a political party. It can be disheartening going to political party meetings. I don't like them. But if different people don't start going to those meetings, that culture won't change, and political parties will stay the dinosaurs that they are. The other one is the action on the streets. Be involved. Find out what local XR groups are doing. Form your own groups. But equally, my understanding of the brief I had for this evening was to talk about environmental issues, environmental campaigns that people can get involved with. I've got some examples of things that are happening in Cardiff and have happened in Penarth, which I can touch on later. But do get involved. Find which avenue works for you. Get involved. And I think we'll talk a bit later about how can that involvement actually be translated to action here on campus as well. So I think that's...
Thanks very much. That was really insightful. Sophie, as a young person yourself, how do you think you'd respond to this question?
I think what's really important, to think about is that the youth is absolutely integral to this issue. This is our fight. This is our future, which is going to be impacted. And unfortunately, we are the ones who have to make the changes now. We cannot wait. Even if we wait until the end of this decade, the climate chaos that we will face is absolutely unthinkable. The war, the famine, the displacement of people, it is scary, and I'm not here to try and kind of instill fear in you, but we need to act now. Even after the COP26, which we touched on, that really didn't achieve much. We've achieved, if that goes to plan, 2.4 degrees of warming. That is abysmal. We need to keep the planet at 1.5 degrees, otherwise the changes we face will be catastrophic. And also I like the idea of this because climate justice is also very intersectional. It brings together lots of injustices across society, and we need to be working towards that. And I think what our generation does really well is we fight for those people who are marginalised, whether that be racial justice, whether that be fighting ableism. We're looking at Indigenous communities, trying to protect them, climate justice, social justice, socio-economic divides. This all is interlinked, and our generation knows that, we understand that, because there are fights going on every day for this. We feel, I think we have the passion, we have the drive to be able to push this forward, to say we no longer want to live in a world that has been created on unequal bases. I obviously am talking from an Extinction Rebellion point of view, so we highly advocate system change and not individual change. Individual change is really important. That's how I'm actually in Extinction Rebellion, because I started by doing all those little things by myself, but I didn't have that community which I needed to try and put that climate anxiety to bed, because it is scary, it is our future. That's what I've found through Extinction Rebellion, so I highly advocate the activist front when it comes to this, and I do not negate at all individual change, that's super important. But the community that Extinction Rebellion has created helps me to kind of mitigate my climate anxiety, but also feel that I have an active role in spreading the message. And I think Extinction Rebellion has quite a name, it has quite a reputation. It can be quite scary for some people to join, but we do have a youth group here at Cardiff. I'm a student, I do languages, I have absolutely no background in like environmental law or science or whatever, I'm not an expert on these issues. I think you're all sat here today because everyone knows the science is simple enough for anyone to understand. As Greta would say, a child can understand that. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on that front, but what I do know is that I want to fight for my future, and raising our voices is one of the most important ways that we can do this. Politicians are failing us. They will continue to fail us. The government has declared a climate emergency, yet has signed off on 6 new oil and gas fields. We need to stop now, otherwise, you know, it doesn't even bear thinking about. But I think that we can do it, but we all do need to pull together for it. And like I said, it's a very intersectional movement. In Cardiff here, we also have there is a coalition movement between all of the justice groups, because we all realise that these issues are so intersectional. We're trying to bring them all together and bring that idea of a community, which Anthony mentioned, together, so that we can make a tangible change here. And I do understand that actually being students, getting involved with climate activist groups can be quite difficult, because we move around a lot. We come to Cardiff, we go home, you know, we're not always in the same place. You know, the groups are talking about kind of these long-term effects of these long-term changes that we can make in the future. I'm not going to be in Cardiff next year, and it's not that I'm disinterested by it, but I know that for me personally, that's not something that I will be able to continue fighting. However, our youth groups, we can do things which make difference here in Cardiff while we are at Cardiff. We can take on the university on issues. Yes, they might have divested from fossil fuels, but actually I read their ethical policy agreement, and they only advocate divestment from fossil fuels for companies which exceed 10% of global revenues, which means they have a loophole, which means they are still continuing to invest in fossil fuels. They are empty words. But we can take them on, but we need to do that together and as a community, and with people you feel comfortable with. And I think we are a small group here at Cardiff. We were bigger in second year. Well, I'm in my final year now, so this was 2 years ago, and we did have a group. COVID has kind of stopped the movement a little bit, especially because lots of our members graduated, but we are building back up slowly, and we do need people, and we need like-minded people like yourselves who are interested in the environment to take that argument kind of outside just, I don't know, talking to your friend about how scared you are. We can make change, but we do just need to pull together, and this idea of community means that we can all support each other in it and work towards what you think is important. And I think aside from that, use your degrees, whichever kind of pathway you're doing, use your degrees. If you're interested in environment, push that through, write your dissertation about something environmentally linked. I often will do, I think my teachers are fed up with the amount I talk about environment for my speaking exams, but that's what I'm interested in, and it just pushes them to show that we also need a more intersectional curriculum. We need to be able to have more cross-disciplinary curriculums. Environment is the biggest crisis our generation faces, therefore it needs to be addressed on all levels, including on our education, and we can use what we have now, so like this university basis, in order to be able to push for that, but just continue spreading the word, having those conversations. But I think I think my main point is that we do need the system change, and in order to be able to put that through, we do need to be out on the street and we need to protest. Doesn't mean you have to get arrested, it doesn't mean you have to climb up a building or any of these other things that you've seen Extinction Rebellion protesters do. You can do something simple, arrestee support, well-being. I will go and like bring cups of tea to people. We have a fantastic arts department in Cardiff. It can be holding a poster, putting a sticker up on a wall, anything, but there is a plurality to that. It doesn't just have to be this kind of hardcore activism on the front, but if you are interested and you are scared, we can join together. There is a community there and we can make a difference.
Thanks, Sophie. That was really inspiring, actually. I feel like a call to action. Ammi, what are your thoughts?
So, the question being, what can young people do to mitigate and adapt? Well, first of all, I wonder how many people drink like Coca-Cola and eat Nestle. These big brands are horrendous. So they're big brands, so you're talking national, but it's something that you can do in stopping eating and drinking all that type of stuff on a personal level, because with these guys what matters is money and where you spend your money. Now, as young people, as a student, I didn't have much money, so I was probably the most eco. Well, you know, when you do your CO2, how much CO2 it's negligible if you're a student, pretty much. It's only when you start making a bit of money, you might start spending it in certain ways. I would always go to Ethical Consumer. Ethical Consumer is a website. You look at where you spend your money. Like trainers, I buy trainers where they're sourced from ethical brands. You know, if you like Nike, I think Nike's doing something where they're using the plastic from the sea. I mean, they're little things, but at least you're voting with your money, as well as obviously voting as well with your vote card. Food as well, the best thing you can do, still talking about mitigation, is become vegetarian, vegan. It's as simple as that, really. If you eat meat, it's contributing to the problem. There's no big deal about that. Everybody, you know, that's a really simple thing you can do. And then obviously clothing as well, which is something that we're going to talk about a little bit later. In terms of adaptation, now the saying goes, the survival of the fittest, which is absolute rubbish. It's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most adaptable. And so we all, you know, as young people, everybody who can adapt, can change to certain circumstances, that's where survival's at. And in terms of young people being the future, you're not the future, you're the now. You know, all these things that people are talking about in terms of climate change, they're already happening. It's already happened. You know, it's people already dying. There's already climate refugees. There's already ecos. All of this stuff's already happened. It's not in the future. It's like 20 years ago. You know, so we're already in the midst of it. So really, you know, that all starts now. When we were campaigning as you know, your age, we would do things like reclaim the streets, you know, where you just go out on the streets and do your thing. And it's because of actions like that that now Priti Patel's come in and started talking about doing what she's doing. Thank God we've got people in the House of Lords to stand up against what's happening there. So I think in your own individual hearts and minds, I think you know what you have to do. And it does start with give up the big brands, you know, vote with your money, because that is what counts. And obviously, when you talk to people, don't get into an argument, just be rational. I always found saying, I get what you say, however, really helps to steer away an argument. So you want to win the hearts. I'm a veteran, so I'm an ex-soldier, and it's not about arguing with people, it's about finding diplomacy and winning hearts and minds. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but that's where you want to be, yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was really great, thank you.
Okay.
So we're going to move on to the next question. For those wishing to undertake their own environmental conservation projects in Cardiff, what projects would you say the local area is most in need of, and what advice would you give them? Should we start with you, Anthony, as you're sort of local to Cardiff?
Okay, it depends on where you want to put your actions. There's lots of community growing going on in Cardiff. There has been for a while, lots of community food growing, which is very important. And you've got, I will share after the meeting, so it will be circulated, a list of things that are happening in Cardiff and organisations that you can contact if you're interested in different things. You've got Grow Cardiff, who set up a few years ago, and they manage community garden projects all over the capital. In the beginning, they started off with Riverside Community Garden, which is a brilliant project. In my other life, I'm a garden designer. I helped design a couple of gardens for them for the Cardiff Flower Show, using completely just recycled stuff we'd found on the street. But they've expanded, and I've been really pleased to see them. They've expanded beyond the target audience, if you would without being patronising, for community gardens. And people go to community gardens and go to the organic shop. They've expanded beyond that, and they're working in communities across Cardiff with those communities, and in a very going to those communities and saying, what do you want to do? And so you've got people designing and driving their own community food growing projects. So there's a whole range of those to get involved with. There's also the option of setting up your own. Equally on food, because as you said, we've got to keep everything linked in. It's been referred to the social justice aspect of it as well. What we haven't seen in Cardiff yet, which I'd like to see, I've seen in other cities in the UK, is an alternative to food banks. Because food banks is so indicative of how we've been governed, that we have hundreds of food banks across the UK at the moment, and that it's actually become a photo opportunity for Conservative politicians to go and have their photo taken at a food bank, as though they have no sense of shame or responsibility that this is actually down to them. But what we've seen happening in communities in other parts of the UK and in Wales is food solidarity, and the strapline is solidarity, not charity. And it's communities coming together, people giving what they can, and it is there and available for whoever needs it. You don't need to be referred, you're not means tested, it's just there for people who need help at that time. And I really love that slogan, solidarity, not charity, because helping each other isn't charity. So there's scope for something like that to be got underway in Cardiff. There is another organisation, Green Squirrel, who do lots of community stuff, lots of community workshops, lots of recycling, upcycling. They've started a really ambitious project in Grangetown at the moment. They've secured some serious funding for that. But and it's another great project to get involved with. But on that, I'd also like to highlight there are two avenues towards doing it. If you want to go down the community growing and community food avenue, there are two ways of doing it. Welsh Government does put a lot of money out there for these things, because Welsh Government wants to see these things happen without making them happen. So, for instance, with Green Squirrel in Grangetown, they secured serious amounts of money to do a large-scale project, but that takes work. That takes really hard work to do that. But you've got other equally small ones. We've got one just around the corner from me in Penarth. There's a little parklet behind his house which was just neglected. He got a £150 grant off Keep Wales Tidy, and it's made most fantastic little wildlife haven. So the scope is there. So what often happens with community projects, this is what I found in my involvement, you can get very, very ambitious and get very disillusioned very quickly then as well, because it becomes such a mountain to climb and you can't see the end. So there are lots, that's the food angle, the community growing. It's a great way of bringing people together. You even get some Conservatives come along. Some of them turn out to be quite human. So, and I think it's quite helpful in terms of community. It's quite helpful for people to meet people who they don't normally speak to as well. I think that is one of the big problems with our political system. We all just stay in our own bubbles and talk to people who agree with us about everything. So that's where these community actions are really important. There are other things going on which might appeal more to other people. There's a lot of stuff going on about active travel in Cardiff. Cardiff Cycle Campaign does some incredible work at pushing for safe active travel within the capital. And I think they're largely responsible for a lot of the stuff that Cardiff Council have gradually done. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, it's about whether you want to put your energies into campaigning to make change happen, to push the councils, to push the senates to do the right thing, or do you want to do something, are you the sort of person who wants to actually see the result of your labour? You want to see that orchard that you've planted and people coming and collecting that fruit, and that being a community asset where people come together and talk about things and talk about issues and break boundaries, break barriers in communities. There's stuff around pollution, air pollution, which we've got some serious issues with in Cardiff. There are all sorts of groups out there doing things. XR Cymru, we've got Cardiff People's Assembly, who we work with quite a lot. So there are lots of organisations out there if you want to find a way of getting involved. Particularly on environmental issues, I would recommend people like Grow Cardiff and Green Squirrel, because they're doing hands-on practical things. And like I said in the beginning, planting an orchard isn't going to stop climate change, but it's a step in the right direction, and we need as many trees as possible. But at the same time as all that, agitate. I think the divestment campaign is brilliant. We've seen that across universities across Wales and England and Scotland. That really makes a difference. Hold your university to account. You know, they rely on you. They rely on the money coming from students. Use your voice. They wouldn't be here without you. Get involved and challenging how the university does things. Because university administrations will be like council administrations. They will have declared a climate emergency. They will have accepted the seriousness of what's going on, because it is impossible not to now. But hold them to account. Make sure they deliver, and expose them to scrutiny, critical scrutiny, when they fail to deliver the warm words that they've delivered.
That was great, thank you, Anthony. Sophie, do you have anything else to add in regards to sort of locally in Cardiff? Any projects that you're aware of?
I would say locally in Cardiff, potentially not projects, though they all sound really good. And I do understand that obviously being a student is really hard to be able to commit yourself to a lot of things. There's so much that I'd like to do, but obviously you have to concentrate on your studies, and then there's like other things. Try not to burn yourself out. But even if you can just take part in one small thing, even if it's something like that, something that I wanted to bring up is, I think if we're looking at environmental conservation projects in Cardiff, something we really need to look at is protecting our green spaces. So I don't know if anyone's heard of the Save the Northern Meadows campaign. No, you're nodding. Some people are, yeah. So basically what's happening is, so Wales it really desperately does need a new cancer treatment centre. However, what they have decided to do, instead of looking at kind of repurposing either old land or like land which has already been developed, or old buildings which need to be repurposed, they've decided to pop it on the Northern Meadows, which is a beautiful area in the north of Cardiff, which lots of people have used during the lockdown. We all know how essential kind of green spaces are for mental health, especially seeing as we were all locked inside for months last year, or the last couple of years. But yeah, so they decided to plonk it on there. They started building, so they're going to be felling like centuries old trees. They haven't got the correct dormouse surveys or the correct like bat surveys for it, so they're endangering this habitat, the ecosystems, the wildlife. They need people to go and have presence, maybe not necessarily do anything too radical, but just spread the word, spread the message, keep fighting. I think Cardiff, lots of people say, oh, Cardiff is a lovely green city. Speaking to this community of people who are trying to protect the meadows, they've been here for 30, 40 years, and they say they've dramatically seen the green spaces kind of be reduced over the past years, and that is in danger of happening with increased development. So that's one kind of campaign which is going on at the moment, and if you're going to be around for Cardiff for a couple of years, something which I think we'll have to fight for more is to protect our green spaces. Also, I think whether it's kind of joining XR Cardiff Youth or not, I think the university does need kind of an active green society. I know there is People and Planet, but they haven't really been doing much recently. There was also a vegan society, which is one of the, I mean, it is the biggest individual change you can make to help to help towards fighting climate change. XR will not take a stance on that. However, we do have Animal Rebellion, which is a specific wing of Extinction Rebellion which advocate for a plant-based food system. Personally, myself, aside from XR, I'm a vegan, so vegan society, if anyone is interested in that, reviving that back up, because I think the environmental viewpoint on that is obviously really, really important. And if anyone does decide to do that and is interested in kind of holding the university accountable for having a more plant-based food system, then come and speak to me, because I've got a campaign working in the back, plant-based universities by 2023. So there's that kind of, if you want to take it from a more vegan angle, but also if you feel like setting up kind of just a generic green society which isn't politically aligned, XR, we're not politically aligned, isn't with XR, isn't necessarily kind of like wildlife conservation, but just something which means that we as students can put together our own kind of community projects if people want to be growing fruit and vegetables and that kind of thing. Because I do understand, like I said previously, it's hard as a student, because Cardiff, although we're here for a lot of the time, we're not here on a permanent basis, so to get involved with something long term can be difficult. But I think getting just a student community together where we can take all of these kind of different strands depending on people's interests, and that's the point, is that as the youth we can shape whichever direction we want to go in, whether you want to focus on that individual change in the community or you want to focus on the activism change. And actually having all of these strands come together means that we are more powerful by taking it from lots of different angles.
Yeah, that sounds really good. So keep that in mind, guys, if you want to get involved with the plant, what was it called again?
Plant-based universities.
Plant-based universities, you can speak to Sophie, I'm sure she'd be happy to do that. Ammi, what are your thoughts surrounding certain projects that people can get involved in?
Cardiff, I'm not from Cardiff, I've not lived in Cardiff. I'm originally, well, I was a student in Brighton, I was a student in Coventry. In Brighton and in Coventry, I'm going to speak about Coventry. Coventry University have got the Centre of Agroecology and Water Resilience, which I was really interested in. I worked for a national charity called Garden Organic for almost a couple of years, and we were set beside them, and a lot of what Anthony was saying was the sorts of projects that they were doing, and especially within the university as well. Actually, they had like a growing, you know, they had like food growing on campus basically, and just getting the awareness up about short food chains, and which is extremely topical now because of the collapse of the food, the logistical situation with the food chains, which again in the news it didn't sound too great what's going on. You know, start by growing your own food. It's very, very easy. You know, if you've got pepper, plant the seeds. If you've got an old potato that's grown a bit, you know, plant it. You know, it's amazing. Does anybody here grow their own food? Anybody?
I do, like back at home, not at uni.
Yeah, like, so you have, I mean, Anthony will know about this as well. I mean, I follow gardening programmes, and coming from like an agricultural background as well. People grow stuff in pots in their windowsills, you know, and even if you're not going to eat it, whatever it is, you know, it's something. It gets that fire in you going. So, you know, start tomorrow. If you've got an apple, I had an apple and I just put the seeds on a bit of cotton wool, and now I've got like 4 trees. Do you know what I mean? Like, just start doing something which might help you feed yourself at some point, because a lot of people actually, coming from an immigrant family, a lot of people, immigrants, economic migrants who came over, they didn't have a lot of money. So first thing they started to do was to grow their own food, you know, and it's a thing. So when we're talking about, when we were talking about culture and growing your own food is part of Welsh culture, it's part of every culture to have short food chains, and I think that's where we kind of need to get to, you know, quite a lot really. Cool, that's it.
Thank you. So the final broad question is, for those wishing to establish their own university or community environmental conservation project, what support is available to them in the local area or within the university itself? So for instance, are there any pre-existing environmental conservation organisations or climate action groups that you could ties to, who perhaps be able to help our audience? I know we've touched on that, Sophie, with your project that's going ahead, but perhaps if you guys had some more thoughts on that. Anthony, I'll go to you first,
thanks.
keep the order going.
I'd just quickly like to go back, because I'm kicking myself about the Northern Meadows, because the Northern Meadows,
Yeah, so why you didn't mention
the Northern Meadows is a crucial campaign that highlights what's going wrong with Cardiff Council having all the right words, but doing these horrible, environmentally destructive things, climate trashing, planet trashing projects. There's been a really inspiring campaign by lots of people, some from Green Party, some from Plaid Cymru, some from no party. But the community up there, I've visited several times and we've done filming up there. They have got such passion and they are defending a vital asset to their community. And it's just, very, very quickly on this, it's something that is an issue in Cardiff. So I've mentioned lots of things that are proactive that we can do, that people in Cardiff can do and young people. We need to do some reactive things as well, because we're seeing the increasing loss of green spaces across Cardiff, not just big places like the Northern Meadows, but also what's been really crucial and important to a lot of our younger members is the loss of venues in Cardiff, the loss of independent venues, because cultural diversity is as important as biodiversity. We need spaces where people can thrive and independent cultures can thrive. And Cardiff Council, we are seeing Cardiff become homogenous You know, it will eventually lose those things that make it unique and make it such a good place to be part of a community. So those are also, and if these are issues that matter to you, if this is something you think I want to get involved with, there's a fantastic organisation, grassroots campaign organisation called Reclaim Cardiff that is seeking to bring together all these, because there's all community campaigns dotted all over the city. And quite often those campaigns start too late. They start when the project's already underway. So Reclaim Cardiff is trying to bring some political thinking and some strategy to those campaigners to put pressure on Cardiff Council. And a very brief political plug, really proud that Cardiff Green Party and Plaid Cymru in Cardiff are working together with the independent grassroots campaigners as part of our council election coming up in May. We're not fighting each other, we're standing with the communities of Cardiff and fighting for what they want to fight. So keep an eye out for those campaigns. Those are really crucial, and that is where young voices need to be heard, because it is your community that's being attacked when they take away those independent venues. Organisations that could help you if you want to set up something in the university. Now, I'm no expert on the structures within the university, but the organisations that I've touched on, they are all very keen on outreach. So if you wanted to do something, I've got some great friends in an organisation called Cardiff Community Energy, which is a cooperative that has spent the last 2 years trying to get renewable energy onto public buildings in Cardiff. Every now and then they get so close, and then Cardiff Council pulls the plug. They would be very happy to advise you on what could or couldn't be done, could be possible on the university campus, which would give you something that you could go back to the administration and say, we can do these things in the university, why aren't we? So similarly, the other groups I've mentioned, and we will circulate the names, if you wanted to do some food growing on campus, there would be people who would come along and advise you how to set this up, what's needed, put you in touch with the people who would provide you. Off the top of my head, Woodland Trust are very, very happy to give out small amounts of trees or big amounts of trees for bigger projects. Keep Wales Tidy, as I said, they have a lot of money from Welsh Government and they do want to spend it in a good way. WWF Cymru will also be very happy to advise on any conservation projects. I'm, with my non-party political hat on, I'm also part of Make Votes Matter to get better voting systems, fairer voting systems in Wales and the UK. We're happy to work with student groups who want to campaign on those issues. Any issue you think of, the people involved with it want to see it spread, so they will come and talk to you. And I will share as many contact details as I can that I think might be useful.
Thanks very much. That sounds really helpful. And I think personally the Reclaim Cardiff sounds really good in terms of, because I have noticed a lot of independent venues, especially in like the nightclub scene. So yeah, that would be really good. Keeping with the flow we've been going with, Sophie, what are your opinions?
Yeah, so if we're looking at pre-established kind of organisations, there's obviously our group. Like I said, we're small, but I hope I haven't scared you at all and intimidated you. I'm not scared. You can come and talk to me at the end. No matter how much you kind of want to get involved or not, there is a rebellion coming up in April. Not saying that we will like force you into that, but if you are interested, and that is happening, go to London. The atmosphere is incredible. I went to Glasgow for the COP and me and my friend just basically danced with the samba band for the whole of it. Like that was my form of activism, was just outside like because we couldn't go into the actual COP bit because that was all barred off and everything, but the delegates would walk past us every day and we'd be there with the samba band is fantastic. There is also a samba band in Cardiff, sorry I forgot to mention this, for XR, so if you want to get involved but I don't know, protesting's not your thing but you want to whack a drum, go and join them. They practice in Butte Park on Sundays. They're amazing. They bring up the morale so much of, especially people who are locked on, or just even if you stood out in the rain, like, it's incredible. Like I said, I just danced for a week, which was pretty great. So yeah, so we are here, and there is also XR Cardiff, which is kind of the more established group. We work very closely with them. Again, all lovely people, all different walks of life, absolutely, just every generation, they're just all just such lovely people, and I found a lovely community with them. Again, I'm going to like follow in taking off my XR hat, but there are other things kind of to do. The Plant-Based University is one campaign which you can get involved in. Also, just any social justice group, really. Like I said, it's such an intersectional issue that we need people on kind of all fronts. I'm also part of Cardiff Student Action for Refugees, so we're also looking at climate migrants because and climate refugees because that is a very specific area, but there isn't much in place for that at the moment, but this is going to be an issue which is going to start becoming a massive problem. Many people have already been misplaced, thousands of people have already been misplaced. The humanitarian crisis is going on in Yemen. The climate crisis is the underlying issues of these things, and we're going to see that more and more as countries in the global south are being disproportionately affected even now. You know, it's not, and also when we're thinking about, say, I said we've got to keep our temperatures to 1.5 degrees. 1.5 degrees, that's for like the northern hemisphere. We're not thinking about those countries along the equator who are going to have that absolutely exemplified for them. So I think getting involved in any kind of justice organisation, you'll be able to find a place in climate there as well. But yeah, also there is a wildlife conservation society, I know. If anyone wants to set up kind of a specific society, it's very easy to do with the university. I know everyone's busy, but if you're in second year, and you can, like, if you do it now, you'll be able to recruit first years who can kind of take it on before you go into third year. It's very easy, you just need, I think, 20 signatures, like, to say that you want to set up kind of society. So if we want to kind of, afterwards, if anyone's interested in putting together very broad kind of just environment, society in general, and then that can happen and we can really start taking on the uni. I think that thing about the kind of energy thing, that was something that I will probably touch on later. And there are kind of other things that we can take the university on. For example, the university pension scheme. Everyone remembers the lecturers striking? Yeah, so they were striking over kind of their pension fund. Pension fund's main investment is fossil fuels. We tried back in a couple of years ago to get the university to publicly call this out, seeing as they themselves have divested from fossil fuels, and they refused to do so. Cardiff University is really not as good as you'd think. I've met with the Vice Chancellor and they're just not willing to they're not willing to go the mile it takes, so we need people to like put pressure on them from whatever that is. But yeah, so that's, you know, I just get involved in any way, I think.
That's really interesting, and thank you for bringing up sort of exposing Cardiff University, I guess.
I'm not a fan. No, I love my department and everything, but it's run like a business, and that's really not good for people or planet. So
just on the samba band, can I just say this isn't my words. I don't know who said this, but a revolution that doesn't have dancing isn't a revolution.
Absolutely,
I love that.
I think I said that.
Okay.
Yeah. There's also in Glasgow
It was definitely a Sikh person who said that.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, lots of that is dancing. Like, there were flash mobs everywhere. They had a cracking one of Staying Alive. I think we've done one before, like outside Cardiff Museum, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Really, it's just I've never met such a bunch of creative people. But
yeah, I definitely find that like sort of protests can seem really, really scary, and then you get there and it's actually just such a fun day out, and it's a good way of like enjoying it while also saying, you know,
institution shares, like people who invest in pensions and shares, and you need to be so careful, like your parents. You know, what's the saying that says if you show somebody a six-figure salary, you just see how quick their ethics fall to the wayside. That's what you're going to have to be careful of. That is the trick in life, basically, because you get to a point where it's like, well, do I go with my ethics or do I go with my money? Actually, both can work together. So if you look at the guy who runs Ecotricity, he's not a bad guy, you know, and you say,
he gives us money.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, so you know, so business doesn't always have to. Actually, the best businesses are the ones, the forward-looking businesses are the ones where they have ethics in mind. You know, and we always have to remember, the environment essentially will look after itself. The planet is not dying. The planet will look after itself. What we're killing is our environment. You know, it's our way of surviving. The humans and the other animals and plants is what we're killing, essentially. So sustainability, the economic, the legal definition of sustainability, the economic, social and environment, those three things need to be working together. That's what sustainability is. So never kind of outweigh one with the other, you know, because people will use that economic argument. They will say, oh, all the Green Party are just a bunch of hippies and stuff like that, you know. However, I did grow up on lentils and justice, just so you know.
Thanks. I just thought I'd open this opportunity, so if there's anything that you wanted to cover that we've not through these questions, this would be a great opportunity to do so. Just,
I think because when we met before, we were going through fast fashion and we were looking at food waste. So because the way I'm set is I'm quite a practical person and very much in the what can I do on local and an international level in order to instigate change, and clothing, food are two massive industries that we all buy into, and we can all do something to change about. And then sometimes you have to look at, well, why do people buy so many clothes? Like when we were kids, I had a few items of clothing and a few toys, and I look at my nieces and nephews now, and their rooms are packed, jam-packed. Can't even close the cupboards because of the clothes and the toys and so much stuff. So why? Why? Where's all this stuff going? Now, where's all this stuff being bought from as well? Do you know what I mean? Can you see how it all links up? And once you've found the way it all links up, then you become a little bit more savvy to how you spend your money, where you invest your money, you know. And also, we're not all perfect. By no means are we perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. But at least if you know what you can change, then you can start to do something about it. You can start managing it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I think on that not perfect line, I think there's an important thing to remember there as well. That a lot of people see, well, not so much anymore, but yeah, they see the Green Party as the party that's going to tell them not to drive, not to fly, not to eat meat. I mean, we slightly do that sometimes. But it's what we're telling people, you know, it's not just about fighting and mitigating climate change, it's about creating a better, fairer world. You know, do the things that we need to do, and we'll end up in a society where the air is fit to breathe, the food is fit to eat, your streets are safe to walk on, your children have a balanced, inclusive education. These are all good things even without mitigating climate change. So we've managed to turn that narrative around. It's about a different way of doing things. And because I mentioned the Amerjit coal mine earlier, that I'm heavily involved in the campaign to revoke that licence. And the immediate pushback, this touches on what you're saying about money, and it means, oh, you don't care about steel workers' jobs. Of course we care about people. We don't want to. Wales knows only too well what happens when you abandon a community because you don't need their industry anymore. That's why the Valley is the most deprived area in the UK, because those communities were just abandoned when the coal mines were shut down. So we're not just about what you can't do, and you can't burn coal, and you can't make this, because people point out to me, but we need steel for wind turbines, we need steel for electric cars, and we do. But you can make steel in a green way. You can make steel without burning coal. So what we're proposing isn't just shut that down, it's have a just transition, create new jobs, skilled jobs, meaningful jobs that help people lead a better life and create a better world. So it's really important for us that we get away from that idea. And when you're in discussions with people, it's not about finger wagging and telling people you can't do this and you can't do that. It's about creating a better world for all of us. And also the idea of being perfect, because we get, again, the don't eat meat issue. It's undeniable, the science about eating meat and its impact on climate change is undeniable. Now, I've been a vegan for 14 years, probably 15 years, but I do a lot of work with the NFU. I go and visit dairy farms and talk to the farmers, because we need those farmers on side. And we're not going to create a perfect society if we just go off and all us people who in our self-righteous bubble, we're not going to be able to change the world. We need to take agriculture with us, we need to take industry with us, and I've had some fascinating conversations with farmers who are desperate to do the right thing, who are making changes within the system already. And then it comes out to the bigger picture. This is where you get back to system change, because those farmers, small family farms, not big mega chicken factories which have to be shut down without fail, those small farmers, they are part of the cultural biodiversity, they are custodians of our landscape, and they produce our food, and it's just one example of where we don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. So I go onto those farms, and I've had other vegans say, how can you go onto a dairy farm? So if I only talk to vegans, we'll never change the food and farming system. So I just wanted to probably got a bit too defensive there about the green party.
That's totally right. That's absolutely right. Because why live in your own little bubble? You need to challenge yourself. You need to challenge. You need to be challenged. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think I will absolutely reiterate this idea of that it's not about perfection, which is why I think our ideology focuses a lot on system change, not climate change. Take veganism, for example. Fortunately, not everyone can afford to go vegan. Not everyone has time to go vegan because of that it would involve more home cooking. It's not as easy for a lot of people. Also, we've been force-fed this idea that we need these things in our diet to be able to.
I'm going to object to that.
Okay. I will. Can I
finish that?
Yeah.
Now.
So, in Oh God! But no, in terms of this, I think the thing of veganism really kind of reflects this idea of kind of system change because. Yes, it may be a solution, and I'm not saying that everybody should be plant-based or everybody should be vegan. We do need to reduce that, but we also need to make sure that it's affordable for everybody. We need to make sure that the government is taxing kind of as the right industry, so the kind of these like mass industries, not the small local farmers. We also need to watch what they're subsidising. They should be subsidising maybe other venues. We should be importing less food, this kind of thing, all of this. And it, on an individual scale, individual change can only happen on a mass scale if we want that to be the way that we kind of change. If we want to take individual, I mean, we are going to have to change our lifestyles and our behaviours, that's kind of inevitable, but we also need the legislation, we need the systemic change, we need the governmental kind of guidance in order to be able to do that.
The bit I'm going to object to is affordability. We grew up very poor, and our Punjabi Punjabis are Sikhs are always vegetarian, so we grew up pretty much vegetarian. Lentils, what my mum could do with a bag of lentils, some onions, some flour. Do you know what I mean? And you don't need to go to supermarket and spend that much on a quid of like pound something on some lentils. We can go to the Indian shop and just buy in bulk a little bit and cook together. If you're living in shared houses. That way you're saving fuel, it's a lot more cohesive, and it's about creative thinking, and younger people tend to have more creative thinking, and they also, having worked with younger people, if there's an argument, they're quicker to settle it, whereas older people can get stuck in their ways, and it's difficult to change older people, you know what I mean? So for younger people, number one, they're more vulnerable, so it's very good to set your ideas and kind of go with your heart a little bit, well, a lot, and be true to yourselves, be true to your ethics, I think is probably what I'm saying, and being green isn't about being wealthy. We've got to get away from that, because there's a lot of academics and a lot of middle class people who are involved in like the organic movement, and it's all, now I can afford to be green, or now I can afford to be a Tory. It's not that at all. It's all about your ethics. If your ethics are the way they are, it doesn't matter how much money you're making or anything. It's about creative thinking, and that is drilled out of you at school. Like you're taught you need to do this, that and the other. And being a creative person, if you do art, it's kind of like, I mean, the art subjects are kind of almost poo-pooed at school at GCSE level and A level. Well, why do you want to do art? There's no future in art. Well, yes, there is, but art also allows for creative thinking outside the box, and that's going to help in all your academic subjects, being that abstract way of thinking. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Universal basic income.
Yeah, UBI.
But just quickly, though, both in different ways there, you both highlighted, going right back to the very beginning, and the talk about talking with indigenous cultures and with communities, so not standing up on my platform from my position of privilege and saying, you've all got to stop eating meat. Everyone's got to stop eating. It's recognising that, and recognising that we'll all get there. We're all trying to get to the right place, and we'll all get there in different ways. And it's working together across our differences. And I think that's something, like XR, the Green Party is member-led. I'm called the leader. I have absolutely no power, except when things go wrong. Then I'm the leader. Yeah. And I think it's the same. And it can be really frustrating, can be really difficult getting consensus and getting to a decision. But when we get there, and this is my experience with XR as well, it is a decision that everyone in that community has bought into. It highlights, it's not easy, it's hard work, but the challenges we face demand that hard work.
Thanks so much. So I'd like now to offer it up to you guys to ask if you have any questions for our panellists. It doesn't need to be to all of them, it can just be to one in particular if you have a particular question. But yeah, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
So for all of you. So in terms of fast fashion, so what would be your best tips to try and avoid it? Like for me, I think like social media is a big factor. Like seeing like all the influencers and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Buying, like all these new clothes, doing their hauls. Like
Yeah.
makes a massive effect on it, but like what are some other things you could do?
So this is a conversation I was having with my daughter. She's like 21, and she was going, "Mum, you've got to say Kardashians correctly, not Kardashians." And it was like, okay, the thing is, influencers have been around forever. Influencers were around when they were wearing big dresses and big hair, you know what I mean? And it's like, depends on how you want to perceive that. Are you a leader or are you a follower? You know, have you got your own way of interpreting things? I had hand-me-downs and went to charity shops. Every now and again I could afford to buy a pair of trousers, but we didn't even know about fast fashion or anything like that then, but it was very rare that I was able to afford to buy anything. So we just adapted. We went to charity shops. I got really into like waistcoats and old, you know, my granddad's old shirts and stuff like that. And guess what? You'll find that people who do that, a few years down the line, that, or even a year down the line, that is in Topshop the next year, because that's how people that's how designers, they will see somebody who's very unique and they'll take it, absorb it, adapt it and sell it. That's how it works. So what I would say is, number one, think for yourself, which I'm sure you do, and you know, influencers are only influencers because you allow them to influence you. That's as simple as that, really.
I think just to add on to that from a sort of student, young person perspective, there's Kate's Clothes Swap, which my house we're all quite fans of. On Facebook you can go and join and everyone just swaps clothes, which is ideal.
Really good.
Also like sell it, but literally like £5. There's Depop, eBay. There's another one which Amelia and I are discussing. If anyone's got graduation coming up, is an app called Buy Rotation, and you can rent clothes.
There's loads of different places that do rentals.
Yeah.
So there's Her.
Yes.
I think Selfridges even do it now. So if you want a really posh outfit, you can go there and get it a bit cheaper. And then also in the Students' Union, I'm not sure if anyone's, it's like opposite the co-op. So basically you can kind of like sell your old clothes or buy new clothes there. And I think for me, it was getting out of the mentality that like secondhand is somehow worse, and kind of like finding the value in that. Because I definitely bought into the whole influencer culture and needing the next outfit and something else for each event that I go to, and I guess it was in lockdown really when I was like trying to clear out my wardrobe, and there's so many things I'd worn once I didn't even really like, but I saw someone wearing and I was like, oh, got to have it kind of thing. So it was kind of like what Ammi was saying, by finding your own personal style and being true to yourself. And what you like, it will last a lot longer, and you'll actually feel better about yourself with what you're wearing because you feel comfortable. You're not just like a carbon copy of whatever Molly May's wearing that day, and it'll make you feel better about yourself. And it is hard at first, but I don't think anyone's suggesting that it's easy to do.
When I wore Doc Martens at school, I used to be called a freak. Dr. Martens, I wore Dr. Martens at school, and now, you know what I mean. It's like they're really good for your feet. And it's good to wear Dr. Martens.
I have to say, I'm not sure if I agree right now. My feet are
You're
killing me wearing these.
They'll be really hurting. You've got to just put some plasters on.
I think there was another question.
Yeah.
You get vegan Dr. Martens as well.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anthony, you touched upon UBI. I just want to know your guys' opinions on the Welsh Government's introduction of UBI for young care leavers.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad we're going to talk about UBI.
That's brilliant.
It's actually, there's been a lot of good work done in Wales, the UBI Lab Cymru, UBI Labs across Wales. One of the founders of UBI Lab Cymru, Jonathan Williams, is actually Wales Green Party's comms officer as well, so there's a lot of overlap. But
Sorry, do you want to explain what UBI is
Oh,
in
sorry,
case people
absolutely,
don't know?
yeah.
Sorry.
Acronyms as well, sorry, apologies. Universal Basic Income is an idea that's been around for a very, very long time. It's been Green Party policy since we were formed 40 odd years ago. The idea behind UBI is that the state just gives everyone in society a fixed income, monthly income. Everyone gets the same amount. In an ideal situation, it's designed to be sufficient to live well, not extravagantly, but well. And it does away with means-tested benefit system. It does away, so there's various different models, and lots of people argue it doesn't work, it's not affordable. One of the ways it helps is affordable because it does away with the expensive means testing system for benefits across the board, which is inefficient, punishes people, kills people in many cases. So it's this idea that everyone gets a fixed amount. Now everyone, you can imagine the arguments get pushed back against it. Oh, and someone did ask me this on Sky Television. Oh, so you'd give George Osborne the universal basic income then? I say, well, yes, we would. We think he's human. The idea then, though, being because it's taxed. So someone who's paying top rate tax, they get their extra £160 a week, for instance. They'll be taxed on it, so it all comes back. And what you find as well, there have been short-term schemes in different societies during economic crashes and economic recessions. Give people who haven't got money, and they will spend it. They will revive the economy. They will get the money circulating. Give rich people money, and they'll just stash it away. So that's the thinking behind universal basic income, and it's about equality of resources, because that's at the heart of the climate crisis as well. The climate crisis has been caused by savagely equal use of resources. And this is a society saying everyone in our society deserves to live a decent life. Everyone will be given the chance to do that. And for me, give away my age now, that when I was young and involved in the music scene in London, you could squat wherever you wanted. This is early 80s. You could squat so you could live for free wherever you wanted, and the dole office didn't really kick up a fuss because there wasn't any jobs anyway. So we almost had UBI. And Alan McGee, who founded Creation Records and brought Oasis out into the world and managed them, he'd often said that without that situation then, so much music wouldn't exist now. So many bands wouldn't have come through. So it's that idea of, so it's not only about giving everyone a safety net, it's about giving people, Ammi touched on the importance of art and culture, which the market economy is just trashing. It's giving people, I might not want to work in a restaurant, I might want to learn saxophone, and it's giving me the opportunity to do that. It's also, even more crucially, people, especially young carers, have people with incredible caring responsibilities. It's giving them a decent threshold without having to jump through all sorts of hoops to get some money for the vital work they do. So that's the idea behind a universal basic income. As I say, we've been advocating for it for a very long time. Like many Green Party policies, we get laughed at, then we get talked to, and then they steal them.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
And that's good, because we want to change the narrative in society. We don't own the answers. We aren't the only people who know what's right. So it's become increasingly popular. There have been trials across the world with varying results. Finland had the most successful, because one of the other arguments that comes back from the Telegraph and the usual suspects is, well, people won't look for a job if you give them £160 a week. Why would they go to work? Well, most people would want more than £160 a week. Most people would want to do something that matters to them, and that might be painting, that might be music making, it might be caring. And the trial in Finland found it didn't increase. The number of people looking for work and applying for jobs actually went up slightly. But now, we're a science-led party, so I have to be honest, the results aren't always overwhelming. There's some scope for argument, but part of the reason for that is and this comes on to your question, is it's very hard to actually have a proper trial of universal basic income. Because the clue is in the words there, it's universal. You're not testing it unless you actually give it to everyone, and you give it to everyone for a significant period of time to see if there are any changes. Now, the Welsh Government, Mark Drakeford has always been in favour of it. The Welsh Government obviously doesn't have the powers to do this because welfare isn't devolved. They had the scope to explore it, and they could use some of their own money, and they came up with this scheme to give care leavers money for 2 years, young carers, people leaving care, the most vulnerable people in our society. They've been in the care situation and they're suddenly thrust into the world with very little training, very little skills and very little support. Now that is obviously a laudable thing to do. They were talking about a couple of hundred people, and they were going to pick a couple of hundred people, care leavers, and give them some money for 2 years and see what difference it would make. It would obviously make a difference, but it wouldn't prove anything about universal basic income. So Jonathan and the people at Ubi Lab Cymru campaigned quite heavily, and they were very good at the way they did it. They didn't just go on air and say, this is rubbish, this is wrong. And there's a lot to be learnt in how we talk to each other about this. They went on and said, this is welcome that the Labour government, Welsh Labour, are trying to do this, but there are serious flaws here. You will not get any data that will prove anything. And to their credit, because there's a technical advisory group, which includes Senate members and academics, who are going to monitor this universal basic income scheme. And it includes people who are critical of UBI. So that works really well, that you're going to get a balanced view of what happened in this trial. After a bit of pushing and shouting, because Jonathan, UBI Lab Cymru hadn't been included in that, they are now on the technical advisory group. And due to their campaigning, the scheme has been extended to, I think it's £1,600 a month for 2 years to all care leavers for those 2 years. That's going to impact about 500 individuals, is the feeling. And no one could argue against that. That is a good use of money. But it's not a universal basic income trial. And the Welsh Government realised that, and they backed down, and they're talking about a basic income trial now, which is being more honest. It's sort of measuring what effect this will have. And again, there are some issues with this. I don't want to be negative, because it is incredibly laudable, and they are trying to move things in the right direction. It's slightly frustrating because they might get negative results, and then opponents of UBI will use that to push back in years to come. And some of the potential negative impacts is you're giving incredibly vulnerable people who've probably never had £1,600 in one go before. That's going to take some incredible, there's going to be a really good support network in place. You can't just give people that money, vulnerable people. So there's going to have to be really good support resources, educational resources, help. And the other thing that we're arguing, and the lab are arguing as well, is you can't just stop it after 2 years. You can't give vulnerable people an income for 2 years and then just stop at the end of the trial. So there's a lot of argument going on now that it has to be faded out, there has to be a gradual reduction. So we welcome it as a step in the right direction, as we do with so many things from the Welsh Government. Their ambition, we can't fault their ambition quite often. The implementation often falls short. I don't doubt their intentions on this. It's going to be interesting. It will hopefully help normalise the idea, and it will help have discussions like we're having now about universal basic income, because the more people hear about it, and especially younger people, it seems like a no-brainer. It's instead of all these bureaucratic hoops and means testing, because the problem with means testing as well for any benefits is you've always got the dividing line where suddenly you earn £10 more and you lose that benefit. And so then you've always got the antagonism between the people who've just crossed the line from getting that benefit and the people who are getting that benefit. And then that helps, the right-wing media can use that quite easily to stir up divisiveness and division within communities, because suddenly you're not getting that benefit, so everyone who is getting that benefit is a scrounger. And that's another thing that UBI does. It takes away that whole narrative of deserving and undeserving people, because we all deserve a decent life.
I met Guy Harding, who's one of the main kind of guys behind UBI, has been doing this for, like Anthony said, decades. There is a website, so just go UBI and you'll find more information there.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't think we have any more time for more questions, but if you do have any, feel free to reach out to the speakers individually or to us, and we can put you in contact with them. So I'd just like to invite Carlos up. He is a human rights officer at the Sikh Human Rights Group, and he's just going to explain how you can get in contact if you want to do anything with them.
Yeah, so good evening guys. I'm Carlos Arbuthnot, as Amelia very kindly said. I run lots of different projects for the Sikh Human Rights Group. As Jasdev said earlier, we're an NGO with special consultative status at the UN. So what that means is we're mostly involved at the Human Rights Council and the Economic and Social Council. So there is opportunities for you to get involved in UN engagement. That would take the form of written statements written by peer groups of collectives of you between 5 and 6. We're looking to get you involved going into local secondary schools, primary schools, teaching younger children about the climate emergency and what they can do. I won't bleat on about it, because we simply don't have the time to go into all the details of what we can offer you. But if you are interested, please write to me. That's my email address there, or give me a call, WhatsApp, however you want to get involved. The other thing is we are currently in the process of establishing a gap year project in conjunction with our affiliates. As Jasdev mentioned, we have affiliates in South Africa, India and in Brazil. And there will be opportunities for you to go out into the countries for anywhere between 2 to 4 months, I believe, in the initial stages, to learn more about what you can do in the climate emergency on an international plateau. And then you can come back to the UK and we'll help you implement environmental initiatives in your local area, lobby at the UN, also at a domestic level, so work with UK politicians. We have affiliations from all walks of life, academics, politicians, lawyers, whoever it is, whatever your interest is, we can support you, both administratively and financially. So if you have any ideas, just as I said, email me, and we'll go from there. But that's a whistle-stop tour of what I do. Thank you very much, panellists, for giving up your time today. It's been excellent. I'll pass you back to Amelia and Alex, and they've already concluded things.
Thank you. And I would really recommend that you speak to Carlos. He's a really nice guy, not scary at all, and the group in general is a really supportive community, and as you said, there can even be financial help available to you, and there's a massive range of projects that you can become involved in. And like the panellists have said, intersectionality is really important. So the Sikh Human Rights Group, obviously he's just going to mention the climate things as that's what we're talking about today, but there are so many things that you can get involved in, so definitely email Carlos.
Yeah. Well, we just want to say thanks to everyone who's coming, and can we give a sort of round of applause to our panellists? And yeah, if you do have any further questions, like Amelia said, just contact one of us, if you want any of their details or anything like that.
So we'll stay around at the end if you want to talk to us. So diolch yn fawr a nos da.